Good evening, gentlemen. I'm going to talk to you on two very important points. And I have received a lot of questions, and that is why I'm going to talk on them. The first question which I've got is that in the case of a war between Iran and Israel, who is going to win? Is it going to be Iran and the Islamic world, or it's going to be Israel supported by America? Well, good question. I'll give you a military answer. And just to tell you all, I have undergone the Defense Services Staff course at Wellington, and I hold a postgraduate degree in military history and military science. I've written 4 books on military history, and now I'm going to put my little knowledge, I will say little knowledge, to test and give you all a feedback the way I feel it's going to be. Gentlemen, as far as this battle is concerned, that is the ongoing battle, I would say the Armageddon. Now, Armageddon, as you know, is mentioned in the Bible. It's very much part of the Bible. And what does it say? It says the last war between good and evil. Now, I can't say who's good and who is evil. That's going to be decided at the end of the war. Whoever wins is going to be the good and the other is going to be the evil. So this in a way is going to be the beginning of Armageddon, agar ye ladai hui to. But the chances are it will take place. But it's going to be a long drawn out process. Now the whole situation is so complicated that you can't blame any one side, if you ask me. I mean, one can trace the history back to 1948 when Israel was created. You can take it to that, or you can take it to 1973, or even before that to the 67 war when the Israelis wiped out the Arabs. And then you can take on the various terrorist activities which started in the Middle East, in particular around Israel and the Gaza Strip, led by organizations like the Hezbollah and the Hamas. And in the bargain, we also have the ISI and Al-Qaeda. They are part of the bargain in these terrorist organizations. And the question is how these terrorist organizations mushroomed. It's a simple answer to it. As a historian, I'll tell you, the failure of the Arabs to win any battle against Israel left them with no scope of salvaging their pride by doing other than doing terrorist acts. Now that's a real fact. And I don't think terrorist acts are condoned by Islam, but these people are interpreting it that it is in the favor of Islam to fight Israel by terrorist acts. And that one of the countries which earlier was an ally of the United States, that is Iran, that was the time when Shah Reza Pahlavi was the ruler, and he in turn had been put into power in Iran by the CIA, I think way back in 1954. So this man ultimately was an autocrat, and he didn't do anything much for the Iranian people other than having grandiose parades and things like that, and he had to run away. I mean, he had a very sad end. I won't mention about that here. He should be thankful that Anwar Sadat, who was the president of Egypt, gave him a refuge and he could die peacefully. Now, Iran went into a revolution, an Islamic revolution, and the Aytoallah Khamenei, who had been in hiding abroad, returned. There was a massive upsurge, and the Iranians took over. I will say the Iranian clergy took over. Since that time, the clergy has been ruling, that is from 78 onwards, and they did some very deadly acts. And one of these was taking close to 100 American embassy personnel as hostages, as prisoners. This is unheard of things, because diplomats or the diplomatic community in any country is never touched. That is part of the Geneva Convention, but unfortunately the Iranians did it, and America had to pay millions of dollars as reparation to get them back. There was an attempt to rescue them under Jimmy Carter, but that came a cropper, where Jimmy Carter himself was not knowing which way the wind is blowing, and he was blown away ultimately in the 1980 election, and Ronald Reagan came into power. But at the same time, his tenure was a total failure. Iran now started facing sanctions, and Iran vowed, that is the Iranian clergy, the leadership vowed that they would make Islam the main force in Iran, and at the same time they would enforce the Sharia there. Number two, they would curtail the rights of the woman as per their interpretation of Islam, and they would destroy Zionist state, that is Israel. And the most absurd thing was, many of the Iranian leadership began to say that the Holocaust, that is almost at a time when 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazi regime in Germany, they said it's a myth, it never took place. Now, what can you say about such a person? जो ऐसी बातें करेगा एक आदमी, उसको क्या कह सकते हैं? You can't tell him anything. Because ऐसा आदमी जो है is not open to reason. He doesn't believe in reason. He believes in his own self. So Iran started a proxy war against Israel. They began to finance the various terrorist organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas, and they began to carry out attacks on Israel. They were all a failure. But then the Iranian leadership thought that there's one other way, and that is we will have what is known as a one mighty blow, a coup de grace, and throw the Iranians into the Mediterranean Sea. So secretly they began to pile up rockets through a supply chain through Yemen. Yemen was their ally, the Houthis, and through them there was Red Sea, and then maybe through the Sinai, we don't know how, but they were able to amass about 11,000 rockets into the Gaza Strip. And one fine day, I think 10 months back, they launched an attack on Israel. Net result, as we all know what happened, that was the beginning, I will say, and the Israelis mounted an assault on Gaza, and I think they are now almost in control of the entire place. So there were a couple of leaders, of the Hamas, whom the Israelis were very keen to eliminate, because they were the ones who had carried out this deadly attack. And the attack was not a normal chivalrous attack. War is an act of chivalry, and a warrior is supposed to follow the rules of law, of humanity, and at the same time the Geneva Convention. But the Hamas fighters who attacked Israel didn't believe in these things, They began to take hostages, and particularly they treated the women very badly, and they abused them. There are videos available, and they took about 300 hostages. I think there's still about 200 with them, and they are not releasing them. Now Israel, I think, has decided and rather realized that these hostages, ये वापस नहीं आने वाले. ये इनको torture करेंगे, मारेंगे, they will do everything. So the war has to be won. And उन्होंने जो इनका number 2 leader था, who was in hiding all the time in Qatar and Turkey and enjoying a glorious life with a number of wives, 13 children, all that, and living a life of luxury, had visited Iran for the presidential inauguration, and there he was assassinated. I mean, the assassination has been covered by so many people. आप जानिए कि I don't want to discuss it, पर मैं इतना ज़रूर कहूँगा, it is a feather in the cap of the Israeli intelligence कि उन्होंने इस आदमी को, इस शख्स को, they sent him to the next world. I don't think he ever expected that this is going to happen. And when you see his smiling face all over the TV, holding up the victory sign and all that, perhaps he didn't know that retribution was at hand. Now Iran has been humiliated, ये एक बात याद रखिएगा, and now they want revenge. पर मैं एक assessment देता हूँ about the about the Iranian army पहले. My first assessment about them is that the Iranian army or even their elite revolutionary guards are not professional in the way they should be. An army is supposed to be professional and fight in that manner. But this is not a professional force. It is a force built upon rhetoric and built upon, just enthusing the masses. And then also anybody who's opposed to them, they just execute him. There was an agitation, by the women of Iran who didn't want the hijab, and many young women were just caught and executed. So they are good at these things. But if they were all that good, they would have at least won some war somewhere. Now this army had been facing the army of Saddam Hussein for about 7 to 8 years in the Iraq-Iran war, when Saddam was in power, and the net result was zero. The Iranians couldn't move anywhere. And of course, even the Iraqis never gained anything. But at the same time, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, or whatever they call it, achieved nothing. Other than a few terrorist attacks here and there, I don't think the Iranian army has been able to cover itself with glory anywhere. Even they had fired some rockets into Pakistan, but Pakistan retaliated, and 8 to 10 of these people in Iran were killed. Then you see the President Reis, who was the earlier president, he had also visited Pakistan just before his death, and he had gone there with the idea that he should be given some technical know-how in return for money which Iran would have given Pakistan. But I think sanity prevailed and Pakistan didn't play ball. So he came back empty-handed. Then he had gone to Azerbaijan for inauguration, and on the way back his helicopter crashed. इसमें बहुत सारी mysteries हैं. I do not know who did it and how that particular helicopter carrying the Iranian president collapsed. So एक election थी, another man came up and he's supposed to be a moderate and he wanted a detent, but ये incident हो गया जिसमें ये Iranian land के ऊपर the Iranians could not defend the number 2 man of Hamas, and he has been blown to smithereens. So Iran की बेइज्जती तो हो गई है, so they are looking for revenge. How are they going to do it? And that is the crucial question, because Iran doesn't have a contiguous border with Israel. They could do some proxy attacks through Syria or Lebanon, but they will not succeed. इसका कोई मतलब नहीं होगा. The Golan Heights जो है सीरिया के साथ are with Israel, and I don't think the Syrians have got the capability to capture that back. In Lebanon, Hezbollah is there, but their one general has just been killed in an Israeli attack, and earlier also the Israelis had killed a couple of generals of the Revolutionary Guard. So generally the problem is that the Islamic world is not united. That is the first thing. Many Islamist countries do feel that whatever Iran is doing is wrong. There is one, however, fly in the ointment, and that is Turkey. Now this country, which is supposed to be a member of NATO, is blowing hot and cold and has said that it will send its army to fight in Israel. Now it is easier said than done, and I will stay here that the Turkish army has also not been able to win any war for the last 100 years. Kemal Mustafa Ataturk came into power through a revolution, overthrew the caliphate, which had fought along with Germany in the First World War, and he ushered in a democratic and secular regime. He modernized Turkey. But unfortunately, this is not something which the Iranians or the Turks want to remember. So now we are coming to a situation where Turkey is fishing in the pie, basically because it wants to take the leadership of the Islamic world. That's all. They want to become the leaders of the Islamic world, but they have to contend with Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and a few other countries like Sudan, Egypt, Jordan, I don't think are on the same platform as Iran. And Iran now is looking for ways and means in which it can take revenge on Israel. See, revenge is not the proper word in politics. Basically, Iran wants to take leadership of the Islamic world. And they feel that in case they defeat Israel and Israel ceases to exist, automatically the leadership will dwell on them. But मेरे ख्याल में even that is not going to happen, because Iran जो है is a Shia country and it can never become the custodians of the holy shrines at Mecca and Medina. There's no way. These are dominated by the Sunni world, and the custodian of these holy shrines is the king of Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country, and I don't think the Sunnis are going to allow Iran to come up. But then there is always hope, and now the situation as it stands is that Iran could launch an attack. Now, it is easier said than done. I mean, I was just wondering what sort of attack they can launch. Maybe a missile attack. But the last missile attack which Iran had made, when they had sent about 100 rockets over Israel, not even one reached the target. And all of them were shot down. They had sent drones, ballistic missiles and rockets, and the result was zero. So there is no guarantee that in case they fight now, it will be a zero. But situation, the stakes are very high now. And America ने अपने 2 aircraft carrier तैनात कर दिए हैं in the southern waters. They are there. Israel is ready. And in fact, Israel is waiting that Iran will commit a mistake and attack them. And that will give them an excuse to destroy Iran totally. Now the Russians, I was reading Russian airplanes have landed, Air Force planes have landed in Tehran and all that, मुझे तो थोड़ा मजाक लगता है, in the sense the Russians doing all these things. If the Russians were all that efficient, they would have won the war in Ukraine by now. They haven't been able to win it. 2 साल हो गए, 2 years, I mean that's a long time. If you can't win a war against a small country which is 1/50th your size, then what the hell are you doing there? What are you fighting there for? To say that the Americans are helping them, NATO is helping them? Well, this was known. Putin knew it, that the Americans are going to come on the side of Ukraine, and they have come, and they got a lot of deep pocket. They have given billions of dollars of weaponry to Ukraine. And though Ukraine is very hard pressed, I can tell you, ज़्यादा देर Ukraine last नहीं कर सकता at this rate. But the question is, the war has dragged on for 2 years, and I don't think the Iranians should expect much from the Russians. Some of the Russian equipment which they may give, including the so-called Russian fighters and all that, they are not a match to the American planes. The sophistication and the technical finish of the American F-35 and other planes, even the F-16, cannot be matched by the Russian planes. And China, I think, is very wise country. They don't want to get entangled in small battles. Just remember that Pakistan fought India in 4 wars, and China never came once on the side of the Pakistanis. They only were making statements. So they'll make some statements again now. That's about all. I don't think Iran is going to get the help from China, military help, because Chinese value the trade relations more than fighting and all that, And they got a very big trade with the United States, almost $600 billion. They're earning about $400 billion per year from America. You think they're going to throw that in the water? They're not going to do it. And now the question arises, what can Iran do? Obviously, the Aytoallah has given the order to attack Israel. But Aytoallah is not a general, he doesn't know what the hell is going on. And giving an order is okay, attack. भाई अटैक कैसे करेंगे? How will you attack? Rocket attack, missile attack, land attack, you can't do a thing. Or you can do a terrorist act here and there, and you do terrorist acts again. The Western world is not going to tolerate it. And if you make a full-scale attack on Israeli cities, the Americans have already made it plain that we are going to come on the side of Israel and we will finish Iran. So Iran has a Hobson's choice, अंग्रेजी का word है ना, Hobson's choice, to do or not to do. Or rather, I will say what Hamlet had said, He had the big question, to do or not to do. Now, whether they should attack or not. If they don't attack, then they become the laughing stock of the world. That they cannot even react, they got no military finish, they cannot defend their guests. And then, from what I understand is, there is a fifth column inside Iran which is opposing the Iranian regime. Agar wo fifth column nahi hota, there was no way the Israelis could have planted a remote controlled bomb inside the very room where the Hamas leader was going to stay. How did they know it and how did they do it? It couldn't have been without the help of the local people. And after all, that area is sanitized by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. What the hell were they doing? This area was under their control. So these are food for thought for the Iranians. At the same time, I am very clear in my mind that Iran is going to be biting more than it can chew. Iran should be very careful in what they do. They will try to do some terrorist acts through Hamas. Hamas, as it is dead and gone. I don't think they are going to be any force for some time. Hezbollah is there, is more powerful than Hamas, but that is again not a direct attack. It is a attack through a surrogate, and that is what the Iranians could do, but then that will not help them. And if they have to really avenge themselves, they have to show to the world that, look, we have done this, and I'm afraid they don't have the capability of doing anything. Now, it's a very strange solution which I should tell you. The Iranians may be good at fighting battles in Iran itself, but I don't think there is any invasion being thought of by the Americans or the Israelis of Iran. They're not going to invade Iran. They're going to use aerial bombardment, bombing and all that and try to finish Iran. And their main purpose is basically to finish the nuclear program of Iran. And this would be the chance they get to destroy it. At the same time, we must remember that the Iranian economy is in shambles. And Iran would do better than to just talk about Islamic rhetoric all the time and interpret Islam in their own way and look after the people, give more freedom to the women than to get involved in all this nonsense which they are getting into it. When I see some of the Iranian leadership and the crowds moving around Tehran chanting slogans against Israel, I think it looks a little silly to me. You can collect any amount of crowds, in any dictatorship, maybe 50,000, 1 lakh, 2 lakh, then, they can ask them to keep shouting slogans. That's what Adolf Hitler used to do. He used to collect huge crowds and they used to be cheering Hitler with, that Hitler salute and all that. So that is not the thing. I think America is also facing a big problem. But we'll discuss that later. At least militarily, America is very strong, 100 times stronger than Iran. And if Iran thinks it's going to get help from China, it's going to be zero. And even if the Russians give them some help, it is going to be token help. And I don't think there's going to be anything. So what does Iran do? I personally feel that Iran will try to carry out an adventurous act, not immediately, maybe after some time. And they know the repercussions are very terrible. There are 2 American aircraft carriers waiting to attack Iran. So if Iran is sensible, probably they allow the incident to blow over and wait for another day. But in case they try any foolhardiness, I'm afraid it's going to be a very, very terrible defeat for the Iranians. And this is something which will mark the destruction of the Iran. Not the Iranian people or the state, but the Iranian regime. Because this regime is doing things which civilized people don't do. And they are giving all the inspiration to the Houthis and Hamas for their nefarious activities. Gentlemen, the war is imminent, yes, but I have one word for it. It's going to be a war in which Iran is going to suffer very badly. And it's about high time the Iranians or the military leadership made a stand model, and like we used to do in staff college, and wonder and think, put the thinking cap on how we are going to face Israel. And why should you face Israel also is another point which may come up. So let us see, gentlemen, what happens. As I've already said, the Islamic world itself is divided into 2. And despite Turkey making a lot of noise, I don't think the Turks have the guts to really invade or attack Israel. Erdogan is made already India an enemy. India is on the side of Israel. India is supporting Armenia, and it will be a very sad thing if Turkey intervenes. It means they will be in direct confrontation with America. And I think America has had enough of enough of Iran, and now they are going to call a spade a spade. So Iranians should better think twice, because the writing on the wall is clear: a defeat for Iran. I think I will close now, and this is my assessment. Iranians do not have the technology, do not have the manpower to launch invasion hundreds of miles away of Israel. They might try some terrorist acts, that's about all. But these repercussions would be terrible for Iran. Gentlemen, if you like this video, please share it with your friends, and I look forward to more interaction with you. In the meanwhile, goodbye and God bless. And be a good boy. Thank you.